All right. We are live on Facebook. We're going to give everyone a moment to join us, and then we will get started with our May the 8th briefing. We're giving everyone a second to join us here, and we will get started in just 1 second. So, thank you, everyone. Thank you to our very special guests who are joining us tonight. We're going to give everyone a couple minutes to join us. Hope everyone is enjoying their Friday evening, their winter and the beginning of May Friday evening, to be more specific. And hope that everyone is, as always, healthy and safe. So we're just giving everyone a second to join in. If this is your first time tuning in, this is another briefing with Brandon about everything. We discuss everything you need to know about COVID-19 in Baltimore City. I, of course, am Council President Brandon Scott. Please, if you have questions, start to send them in now. We will make sure that we get them answered for you. Happy Friday. Happy Friday to everyone. We see folks for tuning in already. Thank you. We're going to get started in just 60 seconds. We're going to get started again. A little rainy, so hopefully everyone is planning out their Mother's Day weekend, virtual Mother's Day weekend, so that we can make sure that we are celebrating all the wonderful, beautiful moms in the world, but doing it in a way that we're also always keeping them safe. We have to do that. We know we have to honor them as always for the great things that they have done for us our entire life, but especially now as many of them on the front lines to keeping us all healthy and safe each and every day as we go throughout this COVID-19 crisis. So, all right, 30 seconds and we're going to get started, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We see people are checking in saying hello to our guests. Uh, Shavonne, you already have one fan in the chat on Facebook that says hello from Miss Taylor. She wants you to know that she says hello. All right. Thank you, everybody, and good evening. Today is Friday, May the 8th, and this is another briefing with Brandon. I, of course, am Council President Brandon Scott. We are going to get started. First and foremost, as we always do, start talking with about the numbers, which, of course, to us are much, much, much larger than numbers. These are people, these are families that have been impacted by this coronavirus across the state of Maryland. As of today, we've had 485 cases of Maryland statewide, with a total of 1,453 deaths statewide. Here in the city of Baltimore, we have 2,941 cases, where we've also had, unfortunately, 146 deaths. 21215 is still the zip code with the most cases at 444, with 21218 being the second highest, which has 215. Always remember, you can go to coronavirus.baltimorecity.gov or coronavirus.maryland.gov for the latest information, including breakdown by zip code, race, and some other things that we advocated for. All right. Tonight, you guys, we are going to have a very important discussion around the impact that COVID-19 has had on students and education in Baltimore. We're going to tackle everything from the devastating digital divide to the governor's decision, Governor Hogan's decision to veto desperately needed education and school funding. We know that COVID has heightened already existing disparities and inequities in our school system, and we're going to talk about that with three very, very special guests. I am going to introduce them in this order and then allow them to give a little introduction before we get into a discussion with them, starting with Joe Francaviglia, the Executive Director of Strong Schools Maryland. We're also joined by Shamoyia Gardiner, Education Policy Director at Advocates for Children and Youth, and Shavonne Berkley, Instructional Lead at Westport Academy. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all being with us this evening. As you know, I grew up going to city schools, from Malcolm X Primary to Dr. King Elementary, Roland Park, and then to Mervo. So I know a little bit about the obstacles our students faced before COVID, but now we know that I faced those obstacles over 20 years ago, and we know now, we know that our young people are facing even more deep obstacles now. So, Joe, I want to start with you. Can you start off by talking about uh, Kerwin, HB and SB1, and what Governor Hogan's unfortunate misguided veto means, and what are the options to keep this legislation alive? And when you do that, Joe, when you get your first question, please also introduce yourself to the listening public.
Great. Thank you for having me, Council President Scott. Greatly appreciate it. So my name is Joe Francaviglia. I'm the Executive Director of Strong Schools Maryland. Before that, I was actually a Baltimore City public school teacher for 6 years. And then I've spent the last 3 years fighting at the state level to make sure students, not only in Baltimore City, but statewide, have the resources not only that they need, but that they deserve. Because oftentimes people say, oh, it's handout, they don't need it. These are resources that our students deserve. There's no handout. Every student deserves a world-class education. And so this is what I've been working on for the last 3 years. And we got real close to the finish line. So with what Council President Scott was referring to with Kerwin, we had victory within our grasp. We haven't lost yet, but we have one more step now to take. So those of you that have been following the news, you probably saw yesterday that Governor Hogan issued his vetoes. So unfortunately, he vetoed a lot of pieces of legislation, and the ones that I think will have some of the largest impact on Baltimore City is the vetoes of the school construction bill, but more importantly, the Kerwin legislation, which was all about making sure our schools had the resources to serve every student. So if you're not familiar with Kerwin, let me give you a 30-second primer, and then I'll tell you what's next going on with that. So Kerwin essentially studied the best education systems in the world. They spent 3 years researching it and said, if we want to move our Maryland school system, which, by the way, Maryland performs in the middle of the pack nationally, and the United States performs in the middle of the pack internationally. So we're average in a nation that's performing average, and that's just not acceptable. And so what they said is, what do we need to do to move our schools from middle of the road to world class? And they said, if we invest in these 5 areas, we can become world class. And that's early childhood education, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, college and career readiness pathways, making sure students who need the most resources get the most resources, and then also a strong governance and accountability system, because we know if we're going to invest billions of more dollars into our school system, people want to make sure it's spent the way that we say it's going to be spent. And so that's the 5 areas. And unfortunately, yesterday, Governor Hogan said our schools don't need resources. And that's just unacceptable and unfortunate. And so he vetoed the legislation. That doesn't mean it's over. It means we have one more chance to get it into law. And fortunately, we have people like Senate President Ferguson and Speaker Jones, who are huge advocates of public education. And so we're calling on them to put their markers down and say, we're going to override this veto as soon as it's safe to come back into session. So that could be January. And so fortunately, Baltimore City has a lot of really strong advocates for public education. So we have one more step. We need to override those vetoes. So I would just make sure when people are listening to this, they know we still have work to do. Your state legislators need to know you demand that they override this veto. And then the last thing you mentioned, Council President Scott, was HB1, the school buildings. And so we know our school buildings are not how we want them to be. In fact, Baltimore City has the oldest school buildings in the state. And we have the 21st Century School Project, and we're starting to see more and more schools come online. I'm a former teacher at Baybrook. So Baybrook is one of the 21st century schools. But if even one student's in a building that's crumbling, that's unacceptable. And so we need a massive investment of resources in buildings. And that's what was going to happen. There was actually $2.2 billion that the General Assembly passed for school buildings, not just in Baltimore City, but statewide, because we know schools in Montgomery County are busting at the seams, schools in Howard County, and every student deserves that world-class education. But because he vetoed the blueprint, that also means he vetoed buildings. And so our governor decided that our kids are expendable, and we need to make sure that we send the message that in Maryland, our kids come first.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Joe. And we know, listen, I actually was at the ribbon cutting at Baybrook, and it's a wonderful, wonderful building. One of the things I'm most proud of being a part of is 21st Century Schools and working city and state and everyone together to make that happen. But we know we have a lot more work to do. I want to turn now to Shamoyia. Introduce
Acting Council
yourself.
President.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Go ahead,
you
Joe.
were also in Annapolis a couple of times advocating for Kerwin.
Yes, I was. Yeah. Yes, I was. Listen, as I said then, I'll continue to say, Joe, it's the most important policy decision that the state has made in my lifetime. Because I always say to folks, I can only imagine how different my life and the life of my friends would be if they had fully funded schools in Maryland when I was there. How many more of my friends would be alive, not in jail, not addicted to drugs? All of the things that happen when you fully invest in a school system in the future. As I often say, we've been investing in the failure of our young people instead of in their promises, which Kerwin is the hope that we actually do that in Maryland, because it's an embarrassment that the wealthiest state in the wealthiest country in the history of the world underfunds the schools the way the state of Maryland does. I want to turn now, Joe, to Shamoyia. Shamoyia, introduce yourself to the good people of Baltimore for those who don't know you. And then can you want you to talk about how COVID-19 has been impacting service providers and what the governor's veto is going to mean for the folks on the ground who is providing direct service to students.
Absolutely. So, hey everyone, I'm Shamoyia Gardiner, currently the Education Policy Director at Advocates for Children and Youth. I'm a former educator. I taught in Duval County Public Schools down in Jacksonville, Florida, spent some time with the DC State Board of Ed, Atlanta Public Schools, and the Family League before this current role. And honestly, I have to add another frame to what Joe said earlier. The governor chose Teacher Appreciation Week to
Yes, he did.
respond after all of our teachers flipped their classrooms and their coursework plans in a matter of days. They are the real MVPs here. And the governor thanked them by rejecting pay increases to reflect the weight of the work they do, the supports that their students need so that their jobs are actually possible, and the investment in our economy that we knew the blueprint for Maryland's future was poised to bring. So the governor's decision has had massive impacts on direct service providers, but I also want to throw into light that the decision he made yesterday is currently costing us $37 million in special funds were on the line. And as a direct result of the governor's veto, that will not be happening, even if and when we do go ahead and get that veto override. So we should be a lot more upset than we currently are. I want to shout out community school coordinators as well, who have been on the ground, have been doing this work forever. Baltimore City has the best community schools in the country. It's proven. But they have been
So
the
Maria,
ones
I want you to pause there for a second because I think
yeah.
that people in Baltimore have to know that. We know, unfortunately, we have this culture where we think that everything else is better. Can you expand upon that and tell people how the rest of the country comes here to learn about community schools?
Absolutely. So less than 2 years ago, we hosted the National Community Schools Conference, and our community school coordinators down in downtown Baltimore at Digital Harbor High, I believe, are receiving national awards and recognition for the kind of work that they're doing. And this is for all of our community school coordinators. The city is a leader as far as the state's concerned in establishing a community school strategy. The policies that we have at the state level, even the blueprint itself, is modeled after Baltimore City's community schools policy and the input of other folks who've been doing community schools work across the state and country. So it's really critical that we give ourselves credit. And then when our school buildings closed, community school coordinators were those frontline workers who were then volunteering and in some cases being voluntold to do additional work. So they took those food pantries that they're consistently operating for their school communities and their students and switched that so that that food could go directly to where it was needed. They have access to housing opportunities for our families that are at risk of losing housing or just housing insecure. They have access to all kinds of programs and have been consistently supporting their communities throughout this. And they've been nimble in a way that honestly our government does not have the capacity to be. They flipped on a dime. So it's really, really important that we recognize them and recognize the fact that the governor's decision made their work that much harder. Beyond that, we have social workers who, for a variety of reasons, are not allowed to be in as much contact with their young people as they typically are over the course of a school day. We don't have any reporting on instances of child abuse or neglect, but we know that because our students are not around mandated reporters as a result of the closing of schools, that we can expect that horrible things are happening, and we have to be on the lookout, and we have to be monitoring and asking our DSS and asking our school system to do what it can to keep track of these students who desperately need supportive services. Childcare providers have been disproportionately harmed by the state's response to COVID. It has taken upwards of a month, and I believe it was 5 or 6 weeks, for childcare providers who have been working this whole time providing essential childcare for our essential workers to get paid. So this disruption is hitting us at all levels. The miscommunication that we're seeing because of the lack of guidance we're getting from the State Department of Education and from the federal government, quite frankly, about how we're supposed to move forward is trickling down. But I have to say that Baltimore City Public Schools and the residents of Baltimore City have been so nimble, so quick, and so about what we've always been about, which is taking care of our own and providing for ourselves, because we know that there aren't people coming to save us. So I'm really proud of that and exceptionally disappointed that in light of all that, the governor made the decision he did.
Thank you, and thank you to all the providers who are on the front lines, changing the way they work, because they realize that the most important thing that we all can do is to make sure that our future, our young people, get the things that they need. I want to turn now to Shavonne. Shavonne, can you tell everyone who you are, about the great work that you do, but also can you talk about your experience with virtual teaching? What impact have you seen virtual learning have on your students?
Absolutely. So my name is Shavonne Berkley, and I'm the instructional coach at Westport Academy. I've served Baltimore City Schools for the past 15 years. My experience with virtual teaching, and we refer it to as distance learning in Baltimore City Schools. It has its glows and its grows like anything else in life. A few great things about it. Hey, it's less gas, no fussing over my beauty or clothes. It doesn't really matter how I look. A grow would be that I work harder than ever. I feel like I definitely dedicate, and I definitely see myself as a dedicated employee. I dedicate myself to anything I do, but I have been spending lots of time supporting distance learning, and so have my colleagues. I mean, we message each other, call each other early in the morning, late at night, odd hours, but we do it because we care. I would say more importantly, I want to acknowledge the learning curve for teachers and staff members when you think about distance learner, because really as a teacher, you need to be like a master or almost a master of the content that you teach. And with distance learning, we had to learn. Your whole world was turned upside down, and everything that you did every day at work for years and years is suddenly different, like snap of a finger, and you have a matter of days to learn, get trained, to prepare instruction, how to navigate all these platforms. Some of them you never heard of before. So it's like Google Classroom, Google Sheets, Google Slide, Jamboard, Rewrite, Toolbar Extension, Blackboard, Collaborate, make them all work in a synchronous fashion and go live, and entertain everybody and make sure they're mentally okay. And it's a lot. And like anything, some teachers are better at it than others. But we meet each teacher where they are and support them to help them get to where they need to be. So I need everybody to remember it is Teacher Appreciation Week. And yes, I thank my nurses and my essential employees, because I love you, delivery man. Okay, you have been a blessing, okay, in this time of this pandemic. So I appreciate you, but we cannot forget to celebrate our teachers. So all the teachers, it's a special shout out to you. You definitely have stepped up to the plate. So we appreciate our teacher too. I believe you asked me about the impact on students. So
Yeah.
I did have something to say
And then,
about that.
Siobhan, also, I want you, because as a mom, I think and shout out to all the teachers, that we love you, we love you, we love you, and to all the parents, now you know how it is to be the teacher a little bit. So when the kid pops off, you can understand now when we go back to traditional learning, you'll have more of a deeper appreciation for what people. I know a little bit about it, being a coach of middle school basketball kids. So I know a little bit about it, not as much as our teachers.
Yeah, you got
A
an
lot of
idea.
parents will have a deeper understanding. But Shavonne, you play both roles. So you're also a mom. So talk about how's it been impacting students, but also tell us how it's been you and your family, your children have been coping with distance learning.
Okay, absolutely. So when I think about the students and the impact that I see on them, two things come to mind. First, there's a shift in roles because some of the students who you might describe as an introvert, very quiet, sit in the back of the classroom, just try to keep it low, they have really kind of stepped up to the plate, and you see them in a different fashion during distance learning, and they really are participating and giving answers. And then honestly, it's kind of been the opposite for some of the extroverts or the ones that are a little more loud, and everybody want to see them come, and the entertainers, they have kind of calmed down a little bit and taken more of a seat. However, the second thing I noticed is it really has highlighted some disparities in social class and educational levels. And let me tell you, in the families that we serve. So let me tell you a little bit more about that. Some families don't have internet access. They have no devices, or they have like 5 kids and one device, which really is a struggle to work out which kid get the device at which time, whose grades are more important, that kind of thing. Nobody wants to make those kind of decisions. And then even some families that may have internet and they may have a device, they really have only been using those things for social media and for fun. And sometimes they really don't know how to use those devices for educational purposes. And you would think, that they have a few more skills than they do when it comes to technology because of this day and age, and they really don't. Not unless, it's Facebook or TikTok or Instagram. So that's it. The parents, even if, like I said, if they bought the devices and they don't know how to use them, then that's a problem too. So they can't connect, they struggle, they get upset. The parents say, well, just give me a paper packet. However, city schools has done some things to try to circumvent some of this by having device deployment and having each school go and assess. I was part of the team at my school. I went and retagged and did a bunch of things to help parents, but it's still not a one-to-one device ratio. And really, everybody, if we're going to be living in this digital age and doing distance learning, everybody, every student and every teacher, because let's not forget about them. Some of the teachers, I felt bad. I gave them some raggedy devices that I know barely work, where they got to sit, they got to be plugged in, and just because that's all we have. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we are making an effort along with the 18 foods, close some of that food gap. And just like Shamoyia said, Westport is actually transitioning into a community school. So we don't have a community schools coordinator yet. However, I've been substituting in that role. So I've been at my building. I'm the person who places the food pantry orders and actually bag it up and reach out to parents and advertise it on all our different school platforms, in addition to my role as instructional coach, where primarily all the instructional lead is coming from me. So I don't want to, hog up the mic, but I have to say something briefly about being a parent, because you asked me to speak to that, and that really, I want to be able to give my honest feelings. So I
Come on,
kind
speak the truth. Speak the
of, I'm gonna
facts,
speak
as
the
they
truth.
say.
I'm gonna speak the truth. So I have 2 kids that are still in K to 12 school. One's in 5th grade and is going pretty well. I'm actually surprised at how she's stepping up to the plate and remembering to get on at a certain time on her own. It's not perfect, but I'm gonna say overall it's going well. The teachers reach out to me. It's working great. Now I have an 11th grader. I asked her, did she like it? She said she loved it. I have an 11th grader who has a lot of special needs. Okay? And this has presented real challenges for me. because during traditional school, he would get services from 5 or 6 different people. You got the regular classroom teacher, you got the special educator, you got a behavior interventionist, you got a social worker providing services. You know, he always got a headache or a stomach ache. We got the nurse for when he, have his little moments. Oh, I'm sick, I don't feel good every 5 minutes. You see what I'm saying? You got lots of support. Now, meanwhile, I'm at home, right? And now I'm his mother, which I don't mind being. That part's going great, family time. But when it comes to school, it is very almost like trauma for me. You understand what I'm saying? And I had to just say, because I want to seem like I got it all together and everybody knows that I work at a school. So how could you ever be struggling with this as a parent? Do you understand what I'm saying? But I want to acknowledge that it is a struggle and it is different. And I am working to come up with a plan that's going to best serve his needs. So you understand what I'm saying? That it is a lot to juggle when I'm doing these kind of conference calls all the time at work and helping other people with their technology. Meanwhile, I'm struggling here. So it definitely has to be a balance. So I understand from some parents. And even the ones who disattach because they don't know how to help them. So they just start not answering the phone and kind of hiding out. So those parents that we can't find, I understand really what they're going through. But we just got to kind of let them know we're there for them, and we will be.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I also worked at Baybrook, Joe. Yeah, so I've been over there. The new school is nice.
It is. It's very nice. And Shavonne, let me be the first to say that we know that you are a wonderful world-class educator, but you're the same way as a mom. As you know, to all the moms, all the parents out here, we know it's challenging for all of us and everyone dealing with this situation, but you guys even more so because you're having to take on more roles. So just know that you are deeply, deeply appreciated, at least by the council president. Shavonne brought up something I want you to go a little bit deeper into. Can you explain to our guests what the digital divide is and how you've seen this worsen and affect students during this pandemic?
So absolutely. The simplest definition of the digital divide is it is the gulf between people who readily have access to computers and the internet and those who don't. That's where the divide is. And this is not a new issue. This did not just suddenly come about because of COVID-19. Advocates have been fighting for digital equity for years. Since the internet came about, we knew that access to it was critical. I think in 2016, the UN said that access to the internet is a human right, and we are where we are as a result of it. So it's really important. It is definitely disproportionately impacting the city. There are people doing work around this. So the Digital Equity Coalition, which includes tons of organizations, I can't name them all, but a few do include the Digital Harbor Foundation, the Baltimore Teachers Union, Leadership and Baltimoreans for Educational Equity, SOMOS, which is Students Organizing for a Multicultural Open Society, and the Baltimore City NAACP are at the table. And the types of things that group has been able to do are extraordinary. They've been working across sectors. One of the most recent wins, and you know this very well, Council President, is that we got $9 million from the Children and Youth Fund, thanks to legislation that was sponsored by Councilman Cohen. And that $9 million is going $3 million to devices and internet access and $6 million to food security, because we recognize that these things go hand in hand. And even though there is a digital divide, there's some basic needs that we need to ensure are met first. So we're really, really proud of that work, and we know that it isn't over. City Schools has ordered more than 12,000 new devices on top of chargers. And just a little caveat about what City Schools has done. We've been talking to Chief Hike Hubbard in a lot of places about their work. City Schools is giving away laptops to students and families knowing that they might not get those devices back. And these are the very same laptops that are on the carts in our classrooms, so that when our students do return to school at whatever point in time that is, then our school buildings are going to be lacking these resources, because we can't guarantee that we're going to get all of the devices back. We can't guarantee that all of our children are in safe places where they can rely upon this. So that's a really important caveat. I know that we're not seeing everything be perfect, all needs being met immediately, but really important work is being done. And when we talk about who the digital divide is impacting, we see disproportionate impacts in the exact same areas that we are always advocating for. So we're talking about youth in foster care, people experiencing houselessness or housing instability, youth who are currently incarcerated, children living in concentrated poverty, children who are English language learners, migrants, immigrants, or in mixed status families, students who require special educational services, those dealing with trauma, kids who are first generation college students, because this does impact our kids outside of the K-12 system as well, and children of incarcerated parents. So as Shavonne said earlier, access to one device is great, but if you've got a family with multiple children, you need more than one device in the home, and access to the internet is also fine. But if you are getting the slowest speeds ever possible, it's actually not very useful to you. And if you've got fast download speeds and you don't have upload speeds, then you're still inhibiting kids' ability to do their homework and succeed. So again, a lot of really important work is underway. A lot of people are working on this. The Teachers Democracy Project is retrieving and collecting devices so that they can be re-administered. They will literally pick it up from your house if you are unable to leave it and go administer it to families. They will clean out your hard drive, whatever it is, to make sure that those devices are ready for people to use. All that to say, there is work being done, but I will leave us with this last caveat. Addressing the digital divide is critical. It is an equity issue, period. It is not the end-all be-all solution. If we get a device into every child's hand in Baltimore City and we get municipal broadband and everyone has super duper high speeds and no one's ever offline, we still haven't solved the problem, because there are socio-emotional needs that our students have. They need to be interacting with one another, with their peers, with adults they find safe. So we also have to keep an eye to the future, where we're returning our kids to class and what it is that their needs will be at that time, and what our school systems needs will be, because they're taking a lot of financial losses right now on top of the loss that the governor just dealt.
Can I add on to that, President Scott?
Of course, Joe, you sure can.
Everything Shamoyia says all the time is fantastic and 100% agree. But one thing that she said is the short-term needs, and I think that's one of the really important things when we talk about this pandemic. We are eventually going to get through this. We are going to get through it together. We are going to be on the other side. And the question is going to come, what do we want it to look like when we get through this? And so there are a lot of really important short-term needs that we need to address. The digital divide is one of them. But we also need to make sure we're not losing sight of that 10, 20, 30 years from now. And that's why when we talk about that state legislation that the governor vetoed, that's the plan for when we get through this. How do we create a sustainable system, not for the next 10 hours or the next 10 weeks, but for the next 10 years and the next 20 years, so that when the people who are watching, when their kids go through the system, when my future kids, it's a weird thing that I think I've never said before, but when my future kids go through the system, we have a system that works for all students. And so one thing that I just implore everyone watching and all of our policymakers and our legislative leaders to think about is short-term crises are important to manage, but long-term vision is still critical, and we can't throw one out for the other.
Yeah, Joe, I want to go right there, but I want you to stay with that thought, because I want to expand upon that. But I want to let our viewers know, while we have our wonderful, wonderful guests, you can see how wonderful they are, that they're some of the best and brightest in the field of education. Shavonne has the best background that we've had on a Facebook briefing with the council president, and we're getting all the love to all your teacher energy, which we all miss. But also want to get people to tell people to get their questions in, make sure that you're sending them in, and then also want to uplift and add on to what all of you have been saying about. We know that we did some very important work on the council and getting resources over to the school system, but we know it has to be even further. Shamoyia brought up a wonderful point about a municipal broadband in Baltimore, which we should have right now, if the previous administration would have followed the guidelines, and we will do that in the future. But we know that it's also important to understand that this is a traumatizing time for our young people. How have we been, and Shavonne, I want to come to you for a second. and say, like, how have you been seeing young people helping families deal with the fact that, especially our young kids, that they can't go to school and see their friends, but then also even like teachers and everyone else. I know for me, you guys, Shamoyia and Joe, you know, any second I get free from 100 Holiday Street, I'm trying to spend it in a school or a rec center interacting with our young people. And even though I've been making surprise guest appearances on classroom Zooms, it's still not the same. Can we talk about like the importance of that and what they're missing, like as far as human interaction? And then, Joe, want you to add in, what does the future of education in Baltimore look like? With COVID and post COVID-19, and what do you think it should look like?
Okay, well, I can start by saying conversations really are healthy. They allow us to express ourselves, tell others what we think, and so we can listen and to their responses, and that kind of helps reshape our thinking. So I think when you're talking about it to young children, they do understand, right? They don't need all the big fancy words, but you just simply let them know there's an illness going around, and it's not just going around Baltimore, but it's affecting our whole world. And so we have to do things differently so that we can stay healthy. And part of that means we have to be more creative about the ways that we see and interact with each other. And in the same way that you would have those conversations with the younger children, you probably need to have them with your teenagers even more. And sometimes through this conversation, you'll learn a lot more about your own children than you probably intended to know. So I think we do need to go out of our way to make sure we are talking with our children, no matter what age they are, to just make sure that they're doing okay and handling it, taking it well emotionally.
Thank you. Shamoy or Joe, you want to jump in there? And then, Joe, I want you to talk about what you think the future of education in Baltimore looks like.
Yeah,
Very,
Shamoyia,
very quickly, and Joe can talk to this further. In the blueprint legislation, there is an entire new addition that wasn't even considered by the commission that would have allocated literally hundreds of millions of dollars to addressing student mental health. And I cannot express how frustrating it is that the governor has chosen to veto this legislation when it is so critically needed. Despite all the politics, straight up, our kids are being traumatized right now, and our state leader has decided that he wants to do nothing about it.
all right, so I'll build on that. So the question was, what will school look like when we come back, and what should it look like? I got out of the future predicting business in 2016 when my prediction was incredibly wrong. So I'm not going to predict.
Blame you, Joe. We blame you. It's all your fault.
It might be. I took a smiling picture on election day. I was so confident. So I've been taking nothing but pessimistic photos of any election-based thing for the last 3 years now. So in terms of what should it look like, I would actually turn it to those watching and say, drop your comments in. I would love to hear from folks who maybe aren't in this work day in and day out, because sometimes we do lose the forest through the trees. So if you're watching, definitely, I would love to hear the comments and the feedback of things that maybe we should be talking about and thinking about, because there's people who are on the front lines that have the experience and have ideas and have thoughts about it that matters dramatically. And most of those people are people who are probably watching right now. So definitely add your comments below and add the other questions that we can be thinking about with that. So let me tell you my thoughts on, what should it look like? And without getting into the nitty gritty of, desks need to be 6 feet apart and there needs to be face shields. And I don't know that. That's going to be a logistical nightmare that I am so glad that we have Dr. Santelises in the seat that she's in, because she gets to figure that out and not me. So very happy about that. But I will say the things that we need to be thinking about from a city lens, but also a state lens, number one is resource equity. We are going to have kids who are going to come back to school having not had instruction for 6 months. We know summer learning loss is dramatic, especially in Baltimore City. this COVID learning loss is going to be like nothing we've seen before. So not only do we need to be thinking about how to catch kids up when they get back, we need to be thinking about those opportunities over the summer to make sure we can catch kids up before they fall too far behind, especially kids who maybe haven't been able to have the access they needed right now. And so there's a lot of tutoring ideas. There's a lot of small group instruction ideas. There's a lot of intervention ideas. All of those are going to be incredibly complex until we can be face-to-face with each other. So resource equity is going to matter. When kids come back, the students who need it the most need to have the supports in place. So we're talking students with special needs. We're talking English language learners. And we're talking about students who are considered to be going to schools in concentrated poverty. Resource equity is going to be key. On top of that, we need to be thinking about out of school time supports and also wraparound services supports, because kids are going to come back and there's going to be different types of trauma. We know students are already experiencing trauma. This is traumatic for adults. It's going to be extra traumatic for students. And so when they come back, we need to have not only the social workers and psychologists and folks in place, but we need to make sure that we have enough of them that when students need help, they don't need to wait a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to have help. And one of the most impactful stories I heard so we traveled the state and we got real stories about why the Kerwin Commission and the blueprint mattered. We talked to some people in Anne Arundel County, and I talked to a student, and this story still sticks with me because what Shamoyia was talking about with mental health, there's no school, there's no district in the state of Maryland that can adequately provide the supports that students need. And this was illustrated by a student in Anne Arundel County who told the story that she was a student that performs well, and not a student that would be on many people's radar for needing mental health support. But she had a lot going on, and as things happen, sometimes we keep those emotions inside, and it just compounded and compounded. And she wanted to go talk to a counselor, and they said, "Great, we'll see you in a week." Obviously, a week's not good enough. And so she actually immediately got into a counselor because they found her crying in the stairwell of a school. Now, it shouldn't take our students crying in a stairwell of a school to have access to counselors, but it's not an easy job to be a counselor because your caseload list is longer than the time you have in a day. So when the feelings of having to pick and choose that counselors need to do in our school system of what students are worthy of their time and triaging is something that before COVID was unconscionable. After COVID is unacceptable. And we need our state leaders to make sure that we have the resources to provide students those out of school time supports and mental health supports that we just aren't ready for. And the last thing I'll end with is I do think we need to think about the opportunities that have been presented with some of the distance learning. This has not been, God bless Baltimore City. They have done the best they possibly can do. They have been a state leader in this. But at the end of the day, we know that distance learning is not a substitute for in-person learning. But there are different things that we found that could supplement or for certain types of students could be supportive. We know there's plenty of students who are 16 need to support families. And, the reason they're not in school is because they need to have a job. Doesn't mean they don't want to be in school. So how can we utilize some of these distance learning opportunities for some of our most vulnerable students or students who don't have the opportunity to actually be in person to make sure that the choice isn't drop out or stay in school, but the choice is maybe I need to have a different type of learning opportunity. And I think COVID has actually shown that it's possible in select cases to make sure we can support all students before they drop out.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I think that that's really critical information. And actually, Joe, you actually answered partly our first question, which was about what are we going to have to do for our young people who will have another 6 weeks of not even some of them logging into the system. And we know when we come back, it's going to require that we work double and triple time to try to help those young people and their families. Because when you hear stories like that, and for me, like that makes it, the story just makes it really personal. It kind of breaks your heart, right? Because folks think about when we say that we need, more funding for school, more support for students and families. A lot of folks, and we know the governor thinks about this as it's a monetary thing. but we're talking about actual humans, families that have been struggling and suffering from inequities in our city and our state that have been created by policy over decades. And now we have an actual chance to start to peel away at that stuff, to have a significant attempt to work towards correcting those things, and just to have it be pushed aside and using COVID-19 to hide behind COVID-19 to do it. To do it that way, to me, is just gutless, in my opinion.
Council President Scott, let me even say, like, everything you said is 100% right. But let's say there's someone on this stream right now who just that didn't resonate for them. They're heartless. They don't think kids deserve an education. Let's say that's someone's position, which I know it's no one on this streams, but let's just say that's someone's position. Even if you don't think that every student deserves a world class or we shouldn't be providing it, this is the economically smart thing to do. Study after study tells us the more we invest in education, the better it is for everyone in our society. So we don't even have to make the moral case, although this is a moral argument. We can make the economic case. For every dollar we invest, we get so much more back. And what's disappointing with the Kirwan Commission recommendations, we're in an economic, we're entering a depression potentially. If we would have invested in our schools, all the research indicates that within a generation, not only would this have been paid back, every dollar paid back, we would have been making money on top of it. So the moral arguments are why I'm here, but the economic arguments are sometimes what we need to win. And unfortunately, our governor didn't take the moral route or the economic route. He left our kids behind.
And so I always like to give our panelists a chance to ask me any questions before we leave. So I'm gonna let you guys ask me any questions of me that you have right now before we see if there are other viewer questions. And there's one last thing that I think we have to do to uplift and make a group of young people feel good about themselves at the end. But right now, any questions for me? Who's first?
I guess I have a question. It may seem, big to one person and small to another, but it really bothers me about the high COVID rate in 21215. And I almost feel like I wish we could do something like pass out masks with an informational paper or brochure attached to help try to get the message across that although we're a very social culture, and a lot of times when we meet and congregate, it looks like a gang of people, but really it's, you know what I mean? It's just the socialness that's inside of us, but we really must disperse and do practice social distancing, and just maybe nothing with too much text that would turn them off from reading it, but something small, half a sheet of paper, big wording or something, the instructions on how to make a mask out of a t-shirt on the back, and give them a mask and just try to go out, and get the word out, like, please go home.
Yeah, Shavonne, for me, that is like really, really, really personal. So I grew
Hold
up
the
in
code.
21215, right? I grew up there. My whole family lives there. My parents live there. I actually was there yesterday at Rogers and Reisterstown and saw some guys on the bus stop right there and went and gave them, like, here, take these masks. Anytime I see someone without one, I'm gonna give it. We've been using great workers, using our safe streets workers in Park Heights to pass out information, masks, put up flyers, putting it up in the stores, doing all of that great work. And we know a lot of those cases came from that one nursing home facility, but they're still, without that, they were still one of the leading in the state. And we just have to continue, as you say, to educate in every way to make sure that we are making sure people are taking this very, very seriously. We know that people need the information in culturally sensitive ways, and you can always rest assured that I'm going to do that. And look, when it's even having those tough conversations, right? On one of my first lives, I talked about how, my mom and dad didn't talk to me for like 3 days because I, had some choice words for them by explaining to them that by no means are they supposed to go to visit my grandmother and hang out in the house. It's just not acceptable for them to do. If she needs groceries, we drop them off on the porch. We do this, we do that, but not going inside, putting her at risk. because they both work in essential jobs where they interact with different people all day, every day. We have to have those conversations with each other as well, because it's not about being mean to someone that you love. It's actually showing them that you love and care, not about just about them, but everyone else that they're going to come in contact with.
Absolutely.
Shamoyia, Joe, y'all got any questions for me?
I have one for you, Council President. I know we've spoken about education quite a bit. Obviously, that's what I do. But I was just wondering, in your personal experience, whether when you went to school or when you were a coach or any of the other times that you've interacted with students, is there a story or a student that really sticks out to you that helps you with how you think about public education and the value of it?
Oh man, there are so many, man, and I am now at the point, Joe, that now I think about what some of my teachers said, like when I went off to college, and they think about, you can see it. Me and some of my friends who we coached together, worked at the same schools together, especially at Vanguard. We had this group of young people, and they're probably watching, look at everything that I do, and we started with them like in sixth grade, right? And now they are off in college, and some of them are grown and working, but there are so many stories for me to be able to like be with them that whole time frame, but then to see the stuff that they overcame, and know again that were it not for that extra support that we were providing, right? I don't want to tell their business, but there were some who they weren't living with their parents and living with siblings, some who we had to continuously buy, everything for: clothes, food, all these items. And just knowing that us being there for them and seeing that that's all they needed to recognize their great promise, but also just being so almost sad and depressed a lot of times, right? When like having to go and deal with middle school and high school kids when their parent has been shot, or they've been put out the house by a parent who has all these issues. That kind of stuff changes with you. It angers you, and now to see some of them push through that and be taking care of their siblings, graduated, working in city agencies, at the point where some of them are now playing like basketball at D1 sports at schools after everything they've been through. It just shows me that despite what everyone says about the young people in Baltimore, I know how limitless their potential is. We just have to invest in them, right? And that's what I care about, right? I always tell folks that's why I spend so much time with them, because I know what it meant for me to have coaches and all these other folks in addition to my family. And for me, not being able to see people in a position like mine, or be able to touch them if they weren't named Elijah Cummings, right? Being able for them to say like, oh, that's not Council President Scott, that's Coach Scott, right? That like they see me in a different light, and they know that whenever they need something, my staff laughs all the time. One of the most common threads in my Instagram direct message is one of my former students saying, hey, I needed some money for Cash App. It's like Cash App Central, right? And they always know that they can always get to me, and that my extra money is for them, because I want them to be able to thrive as much as possible.
That's really nice.
Moya, you got anything?
Yeah, I do actually. A few things. I'm going to try to keep them very quick since we're almost done. Just some other issues that I'm hoping listeners lift up. We talked about the need for mental and behavioral health services. This is directly tied to school discipline. Black people are disproportionately dying from this virus. That means Black children are being disproportionately impacted and seeing death and being traumatized in ways that other children are not. So when they get back to school, if those services are not in place, they will not be equipped to stay in a classroom. They will be pushed out of school, and all this work will be for naught. So we need to address that. We need to keep an eye on our code of conduct and school discipline policies. Same for our students who are at risk of dropping out. We do need to have an honest conversation about what year-round school can look like. And I will say, Shavonne, to your earlier point, I think that's beautiful. The NAACP does have a public health education campaign. There is a truck driving around the city. I'm not going to speak for President Little, but I wonder how hard would it be to put some masks on that truck and really hand them out to people as we're going through neighborhoods. And finally, this does end with a question for you, Council President Scott. Everyone should know that ACY is collecting COVID-19 stories. We believe that oral history and honestly qualitative data collection are very important in a couple years, we're not going to recollect this time very well. We won't know the details. So I'm asking everyone and anyone who can to go ahead, tell your story, talk about what's going on right now. But Council President Scott, we know that some state agencies are not making public data available right now. We know that it's been extremely difficult to get disaggregated data about the health impacts of this virus. What are your thoughts? What are you looking to ensure that at the city level, we're continuing to provide data?
Yeah, thank you for that. And let me also say that I think that everything you said is great and critically important, that we have to continue to uplift that. And I'll be one to share any story. And as we go through that, and if we need policy and advocacy, always, as you guys know, you can come to me. But I want to always also say that for us at the local level, just like we led the way on the racial and the zip code data here, we want to still push the envelope and look more at ethnicity, make sure that we're getting all the information from every agency that we can, every entity that we can. And that's the kind of work that we're going to continue to push as we go through this crisis. I am a strong believer in open and transparent government, and knowing that having the data is critically important to lead the way of how you're going to use it and act, and especially through a lens of equity when you see a situation like we're dealing with right now. And now I see some adults putting their cash app.
No.
Yeah, y'all heard the teacher. She said no. She said no. Y'all can't go to the bathroom. So the last thing, you guys, before I want you all of us to think about a special group. We know we have the senior class of 2020 that is not getting to experience everything that we all got to experience in most classes. What kind of message do you guys have for them? I know for me, I just want them to know that they are special. We value them just like every other class. We want to honor them. We're going to do all the videos, everything that we can do. And when we can, we're going to give them the biggest graduation, the biggest prom that we can. And just know that we're only doing this because we want them to be healthy and safe. But we do deeply love you and wish you the best as you go on to college, and understand that good, for better or worse, you guys are going to be the most unique graduating class in the history of city schools. Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll say this. Sometimes when things are difficult or just straight up unfair, we are quick to tell people that they need to move past it, look on the bright side, find a silver lining. It's okay to sit in this disappointment for a little bit. Like, let yourself feel that, because bottling that emotion up and putting it away is not going to serve us. And if you feel like you need to do something with that, if you feel like you need to change the circumstances that allowed this to come and happen to you, please reach out. I'm here for literally